Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to all of you. My name is Nur Afifa Azlin binti Nur Shamri. Today I would like to present our task about factors that affecting cross-cultural communication in high context culture versus low context culture. My fellow members is Muhammad Ashraf bin Muhammad Sukri, Nur Anis Nadira binti Zainon, and Nur Atikah Ayuni binti Rosli. But before I explain about this topic, I would like to thanks to my lecturer, Madam Rosilawati binti Shahari, for giving this task for us. Before we proceed to our first subtopic, my content for this topic that is, we will know what is the meaning of high context culture, what is the meaning of the low context culture, the difference of the high context culture versus low context culture, two current issues that we will show in this presentation. Next, the factors affecting cross-cultural communication in high context culture versus low context culture. Okay, now let's move to the first subtopic. What is the high context culture? High context culture can be defined as the social context in which what is said strongly affects the meaning of the message to the other people. Before we proceed to the next slide, I would like to ask you, what did you know about the context culture? Okay, let me explain what is the low context culture. The low context culture is the meaning of the message is explicitly expressed by the words and is less affected by the social context. Now let's move to the next section. In this section, I will explain about the difference of the high context culture versus low context culture. For the high context culture, firstly is the internalized understanding of what is communicated, and for the low context culture is the knowledge is public, external, and accessible. For the high context culture, in the long-term relationship. Next, for the low contact culture, it is in the short terms interpersonal connections. Thirdly, in high contact culture, knowledge is situational and relation. In the low context culture, it is knowledge is transferable. And lastly, for the high contact culture, it is multiple cross-cutting ties and intersection with others. And for low contact cultures, it is sequential suppression of time, space, activities, and relationships. Next, let's take a look for our first issue. For the first current issue, for the number one, is about the high or low context communication in the Malay style. Next, the explanation about the issue. This article tells about Malay style communication with a mother and daughter. Her daughter want married and her mother give a motivate how to communicate in the politely. In communication, there are many aspects in language, attitude towards people, interpersonal relationship, times, and personal space. Next, for the number two, is about the lecturer remind to be more sensitive toward other religious cultures. The explanation about issue number two is about this article tell about lecturer remind to be more sensitive towards others' religious culture. The lecturer reminded the student to be more sensitive with other religions. We should remember that the context of Islam are thought to understand other religions and race. The last but not least, the conclusion. In conclusion, certain high context culture tend to pay more attention to the context of the situation in which communication occurs, while other low context culture tend to pay less attention to the context of the situation, focusing more on the content of the message and the goal of the communicative process. That's all from me. Thank you for your attention to my presentation.